Okay, so today's daf yomi is Bava Metzia daf nun tes. This is the daf yomi for Shabbos Chol Moed Pesach, a beautiful daf, and we're going to start where we left off this morning, which is on nun tes Amid Aleph, around 15 lines from the top. We're discussing the idea of what's called onas devarim, where person is wronged with words. So it says Amar Rav Chanina Braid Ravidi, Ma'idachsev. What do we do with the words that say in the Torah, Tonu ish esamito? Person should not wrong their friend, but it doesn't say chavero. It uses the word amiso. It means am she'itcha b'Torah mitzvos al toneo. The person who is with you in Torah and mitzvos, do not wrong him. Amarav olam yehi adam zayar bonas ishto. A person should always be careful not to wrong his wife with words. Shemitoch shedim asa mitzuya, because since she is very easily moved to tears, onasa krova, you can hurt her even uh, more quickly than you might hurt somebody who's not your wife. So a person has to be very sensitive not to insult their wife. Amar Rabbi Lazar miyom shenichrav Beis Hamikdash, says Rabbi Lazar, from the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Ninalu Shari Tefillah, the gates of prayer were closed. Shenemar Gam Ki Azak, as it states, Gam Ki Azak Vashavea Sasam Tefillasi, even though I cried out in prayer, my prayers were closed. The Afal Pisha Shari Tefillah Ninalu, even though the gates of prayer are closed, Shari Demao Soninalu, the gates of tears were not closed. As it states, Shim'a Tefillasi Hashem, Vishavasi Hazina El Dimasi Al Tacharesh. God hears my prayers, He hears my crying out, but to my tears He is not silent. Meaning to say, the tears are what changed the conversation to me and God. That's what God listened to. Whoever goes and follows the advice of his wife, no fel begehenim, will end up in Gehenim. And it states Rako Ayaka Achav, that it says in the verse that there was nobody who gave bad advice to Achav except for Izebel, and that's what caused him to go bad. His wife Izebel. Don't people say Isasach Kutza? If your wife is short, bend down and whisper to her, meaning to say, listen to your wife. The Gemara says, when it comes to a matter of the household, that you have to listen to your house. But in matters of the world, you don't have to listen to your wife. But alternatively, when it comes to matters of religious, that the husband is in charge. But in matters of the world, that the wife is in charge. Rav Chisda says all the gates are closed except for the gates of people who were wronged with words. As it says, Hinei Hashem nitzav chomas, behold, Hashem is standing on the wall of the Anach, uviado Anach. Anach is technically speaking a plumb line. So it says in Amos, a plumb line was used to make sure that the wall was not crooked. So Amos was saying that the walls are of the plumb line. God is standing, and in His hand is a plumb line to make sure that God will bring justice truthfully. But here it could also mean a play on words, meaning onah, meaning to say somebody who is wronged with words, God holds the punishment in His hands. Amar Rabbi Lazar, kol nifra b'dei shaliach chutz mi onah. Everybody is punished by an agent of God except for onah, except for somebody who's wronged with words, as it says, Uviyado Anach. Amar Rabbi Avo, Gimel Eina Parhud Ninal B'fneim. There are three people for whom the curtain of God does not close, meaning say God comes and punishes them directly. Ona v'gezel v'avodah zara. Somebody who's wronged, somebody who's stolen, and somebody who steals, somebody who does wrong, somebody with words and idolatry. Ona d'chsev Uviyado Anach. In his hands is the Anach. Gezel d'chsev Chamas v'shod Yishama ba al panai tamid, because it says about theft, it says about the theft, it says Hamas vashod ishama ba'al panai tamid in Jeremiah, that if there's violence, which is theft and plunder, God will always hear it. And idolatry, avodah zarah, they'll say ha'ama machisim oti al panai tamid. It says also in Isaiah, the people, excuse me, the people that are angering me are on my face at all times. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Adam Zayir B'Tvua B'Toch Beis. So a person has to be very careful about the food in one's house. She'ein Meriva Mitzuya Ella She'ein Meriva Mitzuya B'Toch Beis Shel Adam Ella Itzkei Tvua. The only reason why there is a fight in the house is because there's not enough food, as it says, Hasam Gvulech Shalom Chelev Chatim Yaspiech. That if there is food in your house, there will be peace in your border, in your boundary. Amar of Papa, Amar Yinchi. This is what people say, says Rav Papa. Mishalim Sarei Mikada, when the barley finishes in the jar, Nakish Va'asi Tigra Bebesa comes fighting through fights in the house. Amar of Chinna Bar Papa, Olam Ye Adam Zar Betvuas Betoch Beso. The person should always be careful about the crops in one house. The only reason why the Jewish people are called poor is because they don't have food in their house. As it says, Vayam Zera Yisrael, it says in the pasuk that when the Jewish people sowed the field in the book of Judges, Vayachanu Aleim, and the Midianites camped upon them, the Ksiv Vayidal Yisrael Ma'od B'nei Midjan, and the Jewish people were considered to be very poor before Midjan. Person should always be very careful about the honor of his wife. Person needs to be very careful about the honor of his wife. The only reason why there's a blessing in one house is because of his wife. As it says, for Abraham it was good for her. And this is what Rava said to the people of Mechuzah. Okiru in a shaycho. Be very precious to your wives. Treat your wives with respect, honor your wives, and that way you'll become wealthy. And now the Gemara gives an example of a person where somebody wronged somebody else with words, and therefore they were punished. So it states, and this is the famous story known as the oven of Achnai. So we'll look at this case. The first is it starts on a tangential dispute. Tanan awesome. We learned, as so often the case when you have disputes, what happened as a result of the dispute is far more important than the actual dispute. So the dispute took place over a Mishnah in Kalim talks about an oven that was made from different rings of earthenware, but they were held together, but they were held together with earth, which was not capable of becoming tamei. So that's the case. So that's how Rashi says, that they took chulios. Chulios are rings. And Rashi says there's an oven that was made of rings, and they put these rings into the furnace, which would make it like a pottery utensil, which could become capable of contracting impurity. But what happened was, between them, there were these types of, the way it was built was made it look like it was a utensil that was made out of dirt or feces, which cannot become tamei. So so in between it was this like cement between each ring. So Rabbi Eliezer said this is not considered an earthenware utensil. It's considered like a utensil that cannot become tamei, and so therefore he said it's tahor. The Chachamim say no, it's tamei because we followed the rings. And so therefore, since the rings were capable of becoming tamei, this was really a ring, and so therefore it could become tamei. So that's the way Rashi understands this dispute. So Rabbi Eliezer says this oven is tahor and cannot become tamei, and the Chachamim say it can become tamei. V'zehu, and this is indeed what's known as, on the top of 59b, this is indeed what's known as the tanor shel achnai, the oven of achnai. Rashi says an achnai is a snake, and the snake comes in like a wrapped serpentine manner, in a circular manner, and it puts its tail in its mouth. So basically, so meaning to say, why is it called an achnai? That the rabbis were not happy with Rabbi Eliezer's approach, and so therefore they surrounded him with words and his argument with words, and they made him tamei like this, like a snake, and they made his oven tamei. Some say, Tosfos says, there's the Jerusalem Talmud's version says it's the chaknai, that the chaknai, meaning to say that's the name of the craftsman who used to make these ovens. But the Babylonian Talmud calls it achnai. The Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon says that achnai is a female snake. And it traps you in and you cannot escape. So the Gemara says, Tana, but also Ayom, on that day, Heishiv Rabbi Eliezer called Shuvu Shavaolam. They were bringing many arguments against Rabbi Eliezer, and they brought him many possible explanations. He did not accept them. He kept insisting that the oven was tahor. Amar Lam, Imalacha Kamosi Charuv Ze Yochiach. He said to them, if the law is like me, this sword will prove it. The sword became uprooted from its place. And so the rabbi said, don't bring me a proof from a sword. Chazar, he said, if the law is like me, let the stream of water prove it, that it will stop running. And the stream began to run backwards. The rabbi said, don't bring me a proof from a stream of water. He went back and he said, let the walls of the base medrash prove it to me. He too closely based on medrash. The walls of the base medrash began to fall. Rabbi Yeshua became very upset. If the Torah scholars will defeat each other in law, Rabbi Yeshua said to the walls, what do you have to do with the Torah scholars arguing each other? So the walls stopped falling because of the honor of Rabbi Yeshua, but they didn't stand up straight because of the honor of Rabbi Eliezer. And the walls are still there in this exact same place. So Rabbi Eliezer comes back, he says, if the law is like me, let the heavens prove it. A heavenly voice came out and said, what are you doing with Rabbi Eliezer? What are you doing with Rabbi Eliezer? The law is always like him. So Amar Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Yeshua stood up and said, he says the law, the Torah is not in heaven. What does it mean? What does this mean? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah shekvar nitna Torah me'eretz Sinai. The Torah is already given in Mount Sinai. We don't pay attention to the heavenly voice. Shekvar kasavta bar Sinai b'Torah acharei rabbi ma'atar. Because we say in the Torah, follow the majority, and we don't follow a heavenly voice. So the Chazim Sofer says, didn't Rabbi Eliezer know this, that a prophet is not able to make a new law? How is he able to prove from his righteousness to a Baskol? How is he able to prove his correctness on the basis of the Baskol? And he explains that Rabbi Eliezer holds like Rabbi Shmuel and Gemara Chagiga that all the mitzvahs were only given in a general manner, and there are many specifics that were only revealed to Moshe afterwards. And Rabbi Eliezer said that so too, Mishamayim, they can answer this halacha. Tosfos says that when the Baskol is not against the Torah, then we listen to it. And in fact, we find other examples of where Baskel comes down and says the law is like Beis Hillel, because there wasn't against anyone, because Beis Hillel was really the majority against Beis Shammai. So that's why we could sometimes rely on a Baskel. Also, the commentaries explain, what does it mean? What's a Baskel? So some say it's the daughter of a voice, meaning to say it's the sound from the heavenly prophecy. It's twice removed. That there are 4 levels of prophecy, and the heavenly voice is the lowest possibly. The Baskel is the lowest level of the prophecy. Michtav Me'Elio says a Baskel is something that's intrinsic truth, but it's something you can only know inside of you. And so since it's something you can only know inside of you, when it comes to halacha, we have to rely upon the revealed law, not on the hidden law. Ashkal Rabbi Nassim Eliyos. Rabbi Nassim found Elijah. He said, "I'm like my Ovid now." So he says, "My Ovid Kucha Bruchu Ba'ishato." He said, "What was God doing at that moment?" I'm like, "Kachayach." He was rejoicing, and he said, he was laughing, and he's saying, "Nitzluni b'nayin, nitzluni b'nayin. My children have defeated me. My children have defeated me." Amru, but also on that day, if you call to Aro Shatir Rebbe Lezer, start from Maish, all the ritual purities that Rebbe Lezer had did as a result of his psak about the oven, they came and they burnt them in the fire because they said it's tamei. They did this in front of him. The Nimnu Alav, and they took a vote not to make the law like him again, Uberchu, and they excommunicated him. Va'amru, and they said, Mi elech v'odio, who's going to go and tell him? I'm Rabbi Akiva. Ani elech. Rabbi Akiva said, I'll go. Shema yelech adam sheinu hogim. Maybe there a person will go who's not good, v'odio, and he'll tell him, and they'll destroy the whole world. Also, Rabbi Akiva, Ma'asa Rabbi Akiva, what did Rabbi Akiva do? Lava shachorim and satev shlorim. He went and he dressed himself in black, and he wrapped himself in black. The Yashav Lefanav Berchuk Arba Amos. He sat 4 Amos away from him. Amar Rebbe Lezer Akiva Mayom Yomayim. Rebbe Lezer says to him, Akiva, why is today different from all other days? Amar Rebbe Kim Dumale Shechaverim Bedila Mimcha. Says, seems to me like your friends have separated themselves from you. Afu Kara Begadav. So Rebbe Lezer tore his garments. V'chalatz Minalav. He removed his shoes. The Nishmat got off the chair. V'yashav Agav He sat on the ground. Zolgoinav Demos, his eyes filled with tears. Laka Olam Shlish Bazesim, Shlish Bachitim, Shlish Basaarm. The whole world was struck, 1/3 with olives, 1/3 with wheat, 1/3 with barley. All the dough that the women was kneading became ruined. Tana such a tremendous blow on that day. Wherever Rabbi Eliezer put his eyes, it was burned. Gamliel was in a ship. And the storm came with Tabo to sink his ship. Amar Rabbi Gamliel said, He says, I think this is only because of Rabbi Lezer ben Horkanis. Amar al Raglav, Amar Ribbon Shalom, go over, do it for Necha Shalom, Claudio, you know that I didn't do this for my honor. I didn't do this for my father's honor. I only did this for your honor. I don't want there to be more arguments in Israel. And once he said that, the sea stopped in its anger. Ima Shalom, she was the Beisod Rabbi Eliezer. She was the wife of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanis. Her name was Shalom, says the Ritva, and she was called Ima because that's a distinguished woman. And she was also Achdad Rabbi Gamliel. She was a sister of Rabbi Gamliel. From that day onward, she didn't allow Rabbi Eliezer to fall on his face in prayer because she didn't allow him to say Tachnun because she was concerned that her brother Rabbi Gamliel would be damaged as a result of Rabbi Eliezer's powerful prayer because he was wronged with words. It was Onas Devarim, and we said, and as an introduction to the story, that the gates of Onas Devarim are never closed in heaven, and God would punish her brother Rabbi Gamliel, even though he was justified. Ahu Yoma Reish Yarchav. That day was Rosh Chodesh. The Ichlef be Malay v'Chaser, but she made a mistake. She thought that the day that was the 30th day was Rosh Chodesh, but really Rosh Chodesh was day 31. So she didn't stop him from praying on day 30. She because she thought there's no Tachnun that day. Alternatively, a poor man came, was knocking on the door, and Apiko Rifta, and she brought out bread to him. She found that he was falling on his face, saying Tachnan. Amrle, she said to him, Kum get up, you just killed my brother. In the meantime, Nafik Shipura mi beis Rabbi Gamliel de Shachev. That in the meantime, the heavenly voice, the voice, not the heavenly voice, the voice went out from Rabbi Gamliel that he was killed. Amar, that he was not killed, that he died. Amar lei minaya dat. So Rabbi Lezer said to his wife, "How do you know?" Amar lei kachma kabonim beis Abba ko hasharm denalam chutz mishari ona. All the gates of this is a tradition from my father's household. All the gates are closed except for the gates of people who are wrong with words, and therefore you are. Therefore, Rabbi Gamliel was punished because of the way he wronged you. Dan Rabbanan Hama'ana Sager over B'Shol and one who afflicts a convert violates 3 prohibitions, and one who pushes him to pay back a debt when he doesn't have money over B'Shnaim violates 2. Why is it if you oppress him with words, is it 3? And the ger will some have and so we see from here the ger the ger is included in his brother. But also somebody who afflicts him to pay back the money when he doesn't have it is also in 3 prohibitions. It says lo tochatzanu, the ger lo tochatz. So it's also 3 prohibitions. The ger b'klahu, and the ger is included in ami. So they're both 3 prohibitions. If you afflict the ger, you make him pay you back when he doesn't have the money. These are 3 prohibitions. Tanya, why does the Torah warn us in 36 places? And some say in 26 places. So beger about a convert, because he has a greater evil inclination, and so therefore he can easily go back to his previous status. Which is ironic that the Torah is telling us not to afflict the ger, but in doing so they're telling us something bad about the convert. What do we do with the verse? You shall not afflict the convert or oppress them because you were strangers. The afflictions that you have, don't say to your friend. Meaning to say, because since you were converts, also, and therefore you should not afflict a different convert. I know Damri Inchi, the Zakif way is the Kifa B'diute, somebody who has a relative who was hung by the king. You shouldn't say to his servant or to a member of his home, hang for me this fish, because anytime you mention the word hang, it's going to be reminding him of that. And so therefore, so therefore, you should take away from words in which there are somehow a reminder of those blemishes. Okay, obviously there's so much to tell about the story, and we could write dissertations and many, many books to be written about this famous story of the Tanur Shalachnai, and we're just touching the surface here on Shabbos, on the eve of Shabbos Chol Moed Pesach. A big shkoyach to everybody. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.